The silence in the conference room of the Starlight Grace stretched, thin and brittle, after Elena Vasquez's departure. It was Ambassador Valeriana who finally broke it, her voice uncharacteristically faint. They said no. The words were not just a statement. They were a heresy, a crack in the foundation of reality itself. Councillor Borath of the Vorn brought a massive stone fist down on the table, the impact echoing like a continental plate shifting. Insanity. They are a species of rabid animals, not a civilization. We should blast their world from orbit and be done with it. And prove their point. Emissary Yell's light pulsed with cool reason, though it flickered with unease. That we are not peacemakers, but conquerors. We came here to welcome them, Borath. Not to exterminate them. They have 42 hidden colonies. Borath roared. They have been preparing for this. This was not a refusal. It was an ambush. A declaration of war. Valeriana finally looked up, her golden eyes haunted. No, Borath. It was a plea. Did you not see her eyes? She was not triumphant. She was resigned. She believes she is choosing the manner of her species' death, and she has chosen to die free. She turned to the holographic star map, still hovering where Vasquez had left it. We have profoundly misjudged them. We saw their violence and called it a flaw. We never considered it might be a tool. A last, desperate tool of a species that has always had to fight for its survival. This changes nothing, Borath insisted. The Concord cannot, will not, tolerate this. The stability of 347 species depends on the absolute certainty of our unity. A single crack can bring down the dam. Valeriana finished for him, a profound weariness settling in her ancient bones. I know. Back on Earth, in the fortified command center buried deep beneath the Alps, Elena Vasquez was met not with cheers, but with a grim, solemn silence. Admiral Chen stood waiting, his face a mask of stoic acceptance. It is done, Elena said, her legs feeling suddenly weak. The word is being relayed to all commands, Chen replied. The reaction is what we expected. Fear, anger, but also a strange sense of relief. The waiting is over. On screens across the command center, they watched the live feeds from cities around the world. The initial panic was subsiding, replaced by a grim, communal determination. In Tokyo, people formed orderly lines at distribution centers. In Mumbai, volunteers helped direct traffic to shelters. In Berlin, a crowd had gathered not to riot, but to sing, a low, haunting hymn that spoke of endurance. They're not breaking, Elena whispered, her heart swelling with a painful pride. No, Madam Secretary, Chen said, his own voice thick with emotion. They are remembering who they are. It seems we forgot ourselves, for a time, in the comfort of the last few decades. They are remembering that we are the children of ice ages and volcanoes. It's a harsh memory, but a necessary one. Casualty estimates for the first wave, Elena asked, forcing her mind to the grim calculus of war. If they hit the Kepler line with maximum force, 80% of the defenders will be lost. They know it. They've written their last letters home. Elena closed her eyes, seeing the faces of the young men and women she had reviewed just days before. And the Lighthouse Protocol, Dr. Sarah Kim, the head of the project, nodded from her station. The 32,000 probes are dormant, scattered through Concord space. They are our final word. If we fall, we will not be erased. The truth of what happened here, the truth of the Concord's benevolence, will be shouted into every corner of the galaxy. We will become a ghost that haunts them. Forever. A ghost, Elena repeated. It was a cold comfort, but it was all they had. The Concord High Council had not convened an emergency session in over 3 millennia. The chamber, a crystalline dome floating in the void between stars, was meant to be a symbol of unshakable unity. Today, it was a crucible of fear and outrage. The 12 elder species representatives sat in their circle of power, while the galleries above swarmed with the representatives of the other 335. The air vibrated with a cacophony of translated shouts and angry clicks, hums, and rasps. Valeriana stood in the center, recounting the events. She did not embellish, she did not excuse. She presented the human refusal in all its stark, illogical bravery. They must be made an example of. The Maketh representative declared, its voice like shattering crystal. The being resembled a tree of living diamond. This, no, as a virus. If it is not burned out, it will spread. The Vorn rebellion will seem like a minor disturbance in comparison. And how do you propose we burn it out? Minister Yell asked, its light shimmering. They have hidden their people. They have prepared asymmetric defenses. They are willing to die. How many of our ships are we willing to lose? How many of our sons and daughters are we willing to sacrifice to force a people to accept a gift they clearly despise? It is not about the gift. Borath thundered. It is about order. It is about the absolute, inviolable law that no one says no to the Concord. A new voice, ancient and dry as dust, silenced the chamber. All turned to the smallest of the elder seats. Grandmother Teth, last of the Cathari, unwrapped the cloth from around her face, revealing features so old they seemed carved from the fossilized wood of humanity's first tree. Her 4 eyes opened, pools of infinite memory. I remember, she whispered, and the entire dome leaned in to hear. I remember the time before the Concord. I remember the War of 1,000 Suns, when worlds were cracked open like eggs and species were rendered into stardust. We built this beautiful, terrible peace, to end that. She fixed her gaze on Borath. You speak of order, young one. But you have forgotten the chaos that necessitated it. You look at these humans and see unruly children. I look at them and see our own reflections, from an age when we, too, knew how to fight for a principle. When we, too, understood that some things are worse than death. She turned her ancient eyes to Valeriana. You said their leader was resigned. That she believed she was choosing death. Are we so fragile that the chosen death of one small species threatens us? Or are we threatened because she has reminded us of a choice we ourselves gave up long ago? The chamber was utterly silent. Grandmother Teth had given voice to the unspoken fear. The humans were not just defying the Concord. They were holding up a mirror, and the reflection was unsettling. In the end, fear of the past won out over fear of the future. The vote was called. A peacekeeping fleet of 800 warships, led by High Admiral Thesson, Borath's nephew, would be dispatched. The mission: demonstrate overwhelming force and compel compliance. The unspoken order: shatter the human Defiance, whatever the cost. The Battle of Kepler 138 was not a battle in the Concord's understanding of the word. It was an ambush, a slaughter, and a lesson. Admiral Thesson's fleet arrived in perfect, geometric formation, a parade of celestial power. They expected to see a human fleet arrayed against them, or empty space signaling surrender. They found neither. They found a tomb. The first sign was the gravitational anomalies. Space itself writhed and twisted, a hidden network of human gravity generators tearing the pristine Concord formation apart. Ships that had weathered supernova shocks were ripped asunder by forces they never knew existed. 12 vessels were turned into scrap metal in the opening seconds. Then, from the shadows of asteroids and the dark sides of moons, the human swarms emerged. Their ships were ugly, brutal things, engines and guns with a cockpit strapped on. They didn't fight with elegant energy beams. They used kinetics. Solid tungsten rods accelerated to a fraction of light speed. They hammered the Concord shields, which were designed for energy dissipation, not raw, physical impact. Shields flared and failed. Hulls were punctured. Thesson watched from the bridge of his flagship, Eternal Dawn, his stone-like face a mask of disbelief. "What are they doing?" he whispered. "This is not how war is fought." His tactical officer, a young Saluri, looked up in horror. They are ramming us. Their crippled ships are turning themselves into missiles." For 6 hours, the Kepler system was a charnel house. The humans fought with a feral, desperate courage that the Concord, in its millennia of enforced peace, had forgotten. They fought for every kilometer, every second, trading one of their own for 2 or 3 of the enemy. When Thesson finally gave the order to retreat, his fleet was in tatters. He had lost 227 ships. The humans had lost 64. Thesson sat in his command chair, the damage reports scrolling endlessly. He had not just been defeated, he had been humiliated. The invincible Concord had been bloodied by a species it had considered infants. And as his battered fleet limped away, a single, tight-beam transmission followed him from the human commander at KEPLER 138. It was not a message of triumph. It was a single word, repeated in every known Concord language. No. The news of the defeat sent shockwaves through the galaxy. On 100 worlds, in 1,000 secret meetings, the story was told and retold. The humans had not just said no. They had fought. And they had won. Elena Vasquez, hearing the report, did not celebrate. She went to the memorial wall in the command center, where the names of the 1,800 lost defenders were already being etched, and she placed her hand against the cold metal. "I am so sorry," she whispered. Your sacrifice bought us time. But the cost. The cost. Meanwhile, the human diplomatic corps, operating through the hidden Lighthouse probe network, began their real work. They reached out to the recently integrated, the discontent, the secretly rebellious. The message was not a call to arms. It was a simple question, asked in the dark, do you remember? They found the Grelith, whose planetary rings were the graves of their ancient heroes, a practice banned by the Concord as barbaric. They found the Sibylline, whose complex, multi-voice poetry had been simplified into bland, approved verse. They found the Veldari, who remembered their nomadic fleets and chafed under Concord route assignments. The answer that came back was hesitant, fearful, but clear. Yes, we remember. The Concord's response was to double down. A second fleet, 2,000 ships strong, was assembled under the legendary Grand Admiral Vorlich. Its mission was no longer peacekeeping. It was annihilation. This time, the humans did not stand and fight. They vanished. The outer colonies were ghost towns. The human fleet broke into small, agile wolf packs and began a campaign of guerrilla warfare, striking supply lines and isolated patrols before melting back into the void. They were proving another human adage. The guerrilla wins if he does not lose. The conventional army loses if it does not win. Vorlich, a veteran of 2 millennia of service, was frustrated. He had a hammer, but the nail was made of smoke. It was then he received the invitation from Elena Vasquez. A meeting, a chance to talk. Against the advice of his warmongers, he agreed. He found Vasquez on the same diplomatic station, older, wearier, but with eyes that held the same unbreakable fire. I have not come to surrender, she told him calmly. Then you have come to die, Vorlich replied. Perhaps. But before I do, let me tell you what will happen in 1 hour. And she laid out her plan. The Lighthouse Protocol, the simultaneous rebellion of the Cathari Reach and the Veldari Consortium, the coordinated attack on his supply lines. Vorlich, a master of strategy, saw the board instantly. She was not fighting a military war anymore. She was fighting a political one. And she had already won. To attack Earth now would be to ignite the very galaxy-wide rebellion the Concord feared. To retreat was to admit defeat. To do nothing was to allow the truth to be broadcast, shattering the Concord's legitimacy forever. He looked at this small, determined woman who had brought a 12,000-year-old empire to its knees with a single word. He saw not an enemy, but a force of nature. What do you want? He asked, his voice hollow. What we have always wanted, she said. The freedom for every species to choose its own path. You can help us build that, or you can be remembered as the man who tried to stop it. Grand Admiral Vorlich, for the first time in his long, loyal life, chose to disobey an order. He stood down his fleet. 1 year later, Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of Unity Station. The galaxy was in flux, a painful, chaotic, but vibrant rebirth. The Compact of Free Peoples was about to be signed. She was old now. The weight of the war had carved its lines deep into her face. As the delegates from hundreds of species came forward to sign, she saw not just aliens, but partners. Friends. Among them was Vorlich, who had become one of the Compact's staunchest advocates, seeking redemption for his past. The last to approach her was Grandmother Teth, supported by 2 attendants. The ancient being looked up at Elena, her 4 eyes filled with a strange, peaceful light. "You did it, child," she whispered. "You broke the wheel. It was a terrible, painful thing, but it was necessary." "Was it worth the cost?" Elena asked, the ghosts of Kepler 138 always with her. "All growth is painful," Teth replied. "The Concord was a state of perpetual childhood. You have forced the galaxy to grow up. That is a gift beyond price." She reached out a frail, papery hand and touched Elena's. "Now, I can rest." As the signing concluded, Elena looked out at the sea of faces: human, Saluri, Vorn, Grelith, Sibylline. It was messy. It was uncertain. It was alive. 5 years later, retired and living in a quiet house in the Alps, Elena Vasquez received a visit from Captain Sarah Chen, Admiral Chen's daughter. The young woman brought news of a newly discovered species on the galactic rim, asking if the giants among the stars were coming to conquer them. Elena smiled, a true, peaceful smile that reached her eyes for the first time in a decade. "Tell them the truth," she said. "Tell them we are coming to say hello. Tell them they are free." That night, she stood on her balcony, looking up at the stars. They were no longer a battlefield or a prize. They were just stars again, beautiful and distant. The silence was no longer menacing, but peaceful. The weight was finally gone. She had kept her promise. She had given them a choice. And as the first stars of the evening began to shine, Elena Vasquez, the woman who had said no to the galaxy, finally allowed herself to rest.